Hi, I'm Tom,
And I'm Luke.
and we're on a journey to document and discuss every attraction that has ever existed, ever. Body Wars was a motion simulator ride located in the Wonders of Life Pavilion at Disney's Epcot theme park, operational from 1989 to 2007. Directed by Leonard Nimoy with special effects by Industrial Light and Magic, this 7-minute attraction came at a time when edutainment at Epcot was all the rage. Using the snappily named Advanced Technology Leisure Application Simulator technology, or ATLAS for short, previously seen at Disneyland Star Tours attraction, riders were miniaturized to follow a medical team on a mission to combat a simple splinter infection where, of course, something goes wrong.
In a theme park, I don't believe.
Nothing ever goes wrong at a theme park. Have you ever ridden Body Wars?
I genuinely can't remember if I've even been inside the Wonders of Life Pavilion. I can't tell if it was open as the festival center when I worked there in 2015, or I'm just living vicariously through the amount of YouTube videos I've watched over the years. But I have a feeling it might have been open during Flower and Garden. And it was that classic thing where it's like, oh, that was the Cranium Command entrance. Oh, that was the Wonders of Life entrance. But that's as close as I got, even if that was me.
It became a hot spot for a lot of Disney urban explorers. I know that there was a time when it was all the rage, just like edutainment, to try and sneak into this attraction and everything else at the Wonders of Life. But I actually got the experience to ride this. I don't remember it.
A real thing.
Because it was back in 1989. Not 89, I'm not that old.
Before you were born, that's impressive.
1999, when my family took me to Walt Disney World, and I didn't want to go because we had just bought a Nintendo 64.
Fair.
And I thought that was cooler.
Especially Epcot, I feel like Epcot was all the rage when it opened to be like, oh, boring educational theme park. Where now it's like, gosh, I wish I could have gone to the boring educational theme park part of Epcot.
Even though the Wonders of Life Pavilion wouldn't open with Epcot Center coming online 6 years after the park opened, plans had been in the works for a health and life-focused pavilion for almost a decade. The original plan was for a carnival-themed pavilion, with the main attraction being an Omni-Mover ride called The Incredible Journey Within, taking guests on a journey through the human body and circulatory system aboard blood cell vehicles. Featuring oversized sets and animated props, including a 35-foot-tall heart, the concept proved difficult to attract a sponsor, and the ambitious attraction came with a number of maintenance concerns due to the sheer required scale of the set pieces. It sounds very similar to Journey Through Inner Space.
Which, ironically, is what Star Tours replaced.
Oh, yeah.
So it's kind of got this weird connection, but there's like one piece of concept art for this original version, and I can't tell if it looks like the best ride ever or the worst ride ever, because it looks kind of gross going through an oversized, like, 3D physical set. All around you is like blood vessels pumping and red.
Wasn't the whole joy of Epcot the fact that pretty much everything was both the worst and best ride ever?
I think Marty Sklar, King of Imagineering, can't remember his exact title, but pretty much King of Imagineering, when he was talking about this, was saying, if you could think of moving a lung, for instance, that was 30 feet high on a continuous basis as people ride through, you can imagine how ponderous and difficult that turned out to be. And that's pretty much why this ride didn't work. No sponsor, because this is Epcot in the early days. Nothing opens without a sponsor. No sponsor was going to pay for those 30 feet tall lungs.
Which is interesting because when you think about Disney nowadays, anything that opens up outside of Epcot doesn't really have a sponsor. Like every now and then you kind of get one. But if it's in Epcot, it like has to have a sponsor. Like most of the attractions are just...
Yeah, it's like the unwritten rule still.
Exactly, except for Tokyo Disney.
I think Guardians, from what I've heard, Guardians of the Galaxy originally was going to be a generic space, like black hole themed roller coaster. And they were trying to get sponsors on board, and they're like, well, no sponsors, so instead now it's an IP-based ride. You did this to yourselves. So Riders Health and Life Pavilion's design was shifting into high gear. An answer to Imagineering's problems would reveal himself. It was Michael Eisner, and he said, oh, Disney parks, very boring nowadays. We need more cool, we need more hip brands. Disney, to be fair, hasn't had a hit in like 2 decades. So he brings external people on board to help out making the new rides.
And this was the era when Disney was all the rage, where they started bringing in George Lucas to do Indiana Jones. And then they brought in George Lucas to do Star Tours. And then they brought in George Lucas to do a weird show that opened with Star Tours that barely anyone knows about.
The opening ceremony where they do like ballet and stuff?
It's canon. Well, it's Legends, technically. But
It was canon for a while, because everything, I think, was canon back in the day. But if you haven't seen it, look up Star Tours opening ceremony at Disneyland, where they also kept the park open for like 2 days straight. That's how popular a simulator ride was, where nowadays everyone's like, oh, great, another simulator.
Luca, I don't think you understand the commitment to this series. The fact that we are needing to talk about every attraction ever, that itself will be a video.
True. I think, is that just the opening ceremony? Is that the video? Because that is an attraction. It's better than some rides I've been on, to be fair.
Yes. Well, look, let us know. Would you like to see that all together, or would you like it with Star Tours? We're still figuring this out. We're ironing out the kinks.
But interestingly, the first thing that George Lucas would actually do with the company was Captain EO, the 3D film with Michael Jackson.
Oh my gosh, I forgot about Captain EO. Yeah, so they brought on George Lucas to do a third attraction.
Which would, yeah. And then they does Captain EO and they're like, great work. But Captain EO doesn't have a recognizable brand. So can you do something with this slightly recognizable brand you're known for called Star Wars, maybe, by any chance? And he's like, yeah, sure, fine.
He's just there like, I don't know. I don't know if Star Wars would work.
I want to make another weird sci-fi movie with Captain Jackson.
Is that Michael Jackson? Is that what?
Oh, yeah. I combined the real person and the character.
He got upgraded. No longer was he known for his pop music, but instead his commitment to the war effort.
So after a few years of development, Star Wars would soar into Disneyland in 1987 in Star Tours. Did some people say tours as in like tours?
Star Tours.
Because that is a better pun if you say it with that accent than it is in our accent where it's Star Tours.
Is that British? Star Tours. Maybe it only makes sense if you're like the imperial side of things, where everyone just has to have a British accent because they're evil, apparently. British people in the Star Wars universe are evil because they're Star Tours.
So Star Tours opens up 1987. It uses cutting-edge technology that was previously reserved for the US military in like flight simulators. These simulators allowed a ride vehicle to move, pitch, roll, tilt, and yaw, all in sync with a pre-recorded film, which allowed guests to go anywhere without the need to build giant imposing sets and ride systems. And didn't we just talk about somebody having an issue with a giant imposing set and ride system?
I don't know. Did we? Maybe that's foreshadowing.
There might be a connection here, because Wonders of Life just got a sponsor, MetLife, who was willing to spend $100 million to make something happen.
Now, I don't know much about MetLife. I know that they're an insurance company.
They're still around?
I believe they're still around.
I don't know.
I think so.
Probably.
I would Google it, but every time I Google something, I cause an earthquake on my screen. MetLife. MetLife Australia apparently exists.
Oh, I was going to say, I was literally just about to say, it's probably an American company. That's why we've never heard of it. Apparently not. It exists here too.
MetLife Australia currently has 2.3 stars on Google with 56 reviews. So they're very popular.
They're all just 1 star. How dare you close Body Wars? 1 star. How dare you close the Martin short film about having a baby?
The other thing as well about MetLife is pay attention to that name, because I really like that name. The Wonders of Life Pavilion would go on to open at Epcot on October 19th, 1989, 7 and a few bit years after the park first opened. Waiting inside the giant golden dome was a wide range of attractions and experiences that we'll eventually talk about. Cranium Command, a theater show with audio animatronic actors and a movie. The show explained the functions of the brain and its interaction with the human body. This is also where Buzzy was,
Before he got stolen.
Yeah, well, not fully stolen, some might say.
Yeah, just like some of his clothes and his skin or so, like his skin head.
Yeah, like his jacket and, his skin, the normal part to steal.
Wasn't it like one guy stole it and then Imagineering went in and took the rest of it, but they didn't tell Park Ops? So Park Ops were like, oh, somebody stole the whole thing. And then it came out later, it was like, no, they didn't steal the whole thing. One guy stole the jacket and the skin. And then Imagineering was like, oh, better cart this off somewhere safe.
It was cleared for archives, from what I know. So essentially, they were ready to take it. And I think before the skin and jacket was stolen, they went in and took that. And then that kind of hurried things along because they're like, we don't want any more people to come and steal it. Because apparently there's like no security cameras through all this because it was constructed in the 80s. So
there's still some rides that currently exist. Maybe rides that tell you there is a security camera throughout it, that there actually isn't, apart from the one they show you when they say there's security cameras throughout the ride.
Oh.
Maybe it's an opening day Magic Kingdom attraction.
Elsewhere at Wonders of Life, you had Frontiers of Medicine. Listen to stories about medicine and the brain on small television.
Oh, Phew, I'm glad it's on small televisions. It might be too enthralling if it was on large ones.
No one would ever go to the rest of Epcot, in fairness.
No. They also had Coach's Corner, where you can swing a bat while professional player gives tips. And what a job for that professional sports person to just sit at Epcot and watch 6-year-olds swing a baseball bat and have to go, tighten up your shoulders a little bit, please.
Wait, was this a legitimate person? Like, it's not a video of someone being like, great job, Billy.
Maybe that seems more likely, but in my head canon, it's just a professional baseball player in the off season.
This is Disney of the 80s though, so maybe they did just have a professional baseball player who's like, yep, I'm gonna go and work for Disney World for 9 months of the year and then play professional baseball for the rest.
Maybe that was the precursor to the college program. It was just only for college sports players.
Fair, I'd do it, even though I don't play sports. They also had Goofy About Health, a multimedia show about healthy living hosted by Goofy, using clips from his cartoons.
Which I think, did you ever hear of Habit Heroes? It's slightly off topic. I guess we'll talk about it eventually. But Habit Heroes, where it was essentially Disney created almost a revival of the Wonders of Life Pavilion, in that it was all about, healthy eating and healthy living and all of that. Until they got in trouble because the villains of the game, it was in Interventions, were just regular people, but they were fat, and that was why they were the villain, according to the attraction.
Oh!
Yeah, that didn't last very long, and then it got reworked. It was actually there when in 2015, but I remember very little about Interventions, apart from Summer of All Thrills. I think that may have been the only thing I remember doing vividly.
I remember we did the Storm House, which was aggressively underwhelming. The one where you sit in there and then they simulate a storm. They're like, this is what it's like to be in a twister. And then the walls would peel away. But there's the earthquake house that we have in Australia, where it's like you're actually in the earthquake and then it all falls apart.
Is that Questacon?
I think it's a Questacon, and it's really cool because it's actually you see the house tear apart and all that. This was more just screens. It was a little bit underwhelming.
Woohoo.
But we're not talking about Interventions. We're talking about Wonders of Life. So elsewhere in Wonders of Life, we had the Fitness Fairgrounds, which tested guests' athletic abilities. They had the Sensory Funhouse, an interactive playground, which tested guests' sensory abilities, including a mez room. What's in a mez room?
I think it's pronounced Ames. It's one of the... Have you ever seen those rooms where they're kind of... If you frame the camera perfectly, it looks like a regular room, but you can stand in the opposite corners and one person will look really small, one person will look really big. And then they cross over and then the other person looks really big and the other person looks really small.
Like a trick illusion house.
Yeah, like a trick house.
Yeah, okay. The Making of Me, possibly one of the most infamous attractions at Wonders of Life, which was a short movie about birth and life starring Martin Short.
Now the next one is, for some reason, even though I never went into Wonders of Life, I have this vividly implanted in my memory. This was Wonder Cycles. They were bikes. You could pedal the bikes, and as you pedaled the bike, it essentially activated a VCR player that made it look like you were pedaling through famous locations. So you'd sit down, TV screen in front of you, pedal. As you pedaled, the faster you pedaled, the faster the video would go. So you could go through the Rose Parade, you could go through like a small little micro town, and then most importantly, you could ride through Disneyland. But it was kind of like, yes, we're aware that you were riding a bike through Disneyland, so we kind of like look at you and like jump out of the way and stuff.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
I want to try this.
But those are the small scale things in Wonders of Life. We're not talking about them yet. Today, we're here to talk about Body Wars, which you kind of couldn't ignore once you're in the pavilion, because everything else is this kind of like whimsy carnival vibe. And then just on one wall, there's these kind of red arteries and blood cells painting that was the entrance to Body Wars. Completely different everything else.
This big, grand, bold text, like Helvetica style, bold text above it that was just like, Body Wars. No, like, nothing fancy. It's not like Star Tours where they have the warp effect or anything like that behind it. It's just white text.
That's all they needed. They were confident. They were so confident in this attraction.
So let's step through the experience of Body Wars. Guests enter Body Wars on the left side of the Wonders of Life dome, under the giant inviting mural of blood vessels that Luke so graciously blessed us with of an explanation. There was an extended queue that would be utilized, but I think after a couple of months, this wouldn't really be used at all because of a problem that arose with the attraction and possibly the rest of the resort as a whole a couple months later.
Why is Disney nowadays just refusing to build extended queues? Have you noticed that?
Because of Genie Plus.
Yeah, but that should be more reason to build the queue, because the standby queue isn't going to move as briskly. And from what I've heard, it apparently has to do with the connection between Imagineering and operations. Like, Imagineering builds the internal queues, and then operations has to deal with the external queues, but they don't get the budgets to do so, which is why things like Tron and Guardians are still under virtual queue.
I have heard that, where so Imagineering will hand over an attraction, and then operations will take it over, and Imagineering has a scope, and if you want anything outside of that scope, it's like, well, you gotta get it yourself.
You'll be paying for it.
So this extended queue eventually led into the main queue, surprisingly, contained within a separate external wing of the pavilion. There was a little plaque here as well that actually gave the credits to the attraction, which I found really interesting. As you were walking in on the right, a little silver plaque that said like, Body Wars, directed by Leonard Nimoy, with effects by Industrial Lights and Magic. Genuinely, I think this is the first time I have ever seen a reference to a credits in any sort of theme park ever. Like, you get little snippets here and there, but never before have I...
Well, we have to know, like, to know, you know, what creative created, you know, what Tony Baxter worked on, and that's like you have to read, you have to go into the archives, where just to be like, oh, by the way, I do wonder if that was a Leonard Nimoy thing, to be like, I'll do it if I get credits in the ride. And then they were like, well, no, we're not going to roll credits at the end of the ride film, so we'll just put this at the entrance.
Which, I guess there is that problem of, like, where do you put the credits in an attraction? Because it would be weird if it's like, thank you for riding Mystic Manor, directed by such and such, with writing by...
Then everyone would be famous. Oh, like, it would all be famous. That, when it starts actually getting credits in theme parks, that's when we start getting Chris Pratt in theme parks, which definitely hasn't happened yet.
Not in this universe. There's no Chris Pratt in any theme park rides. What is he up to? Like 5?
I don't know. Isn't he? Oh no, because he's not technically in Legoland.
No.
But it was like between different theme parks at Walt Disney World.
Chris Pratt, I believe, is in Velocicoaster. Well, he's definitely in Velocicoaster. Jurassic World at Universal Studios Hollywood. Then
both the Guardians rides at Disneyland and Epcot. So he's At both coasts, he's in Universal and Disney rides.
He's getting around, that old Chris Pratt.
And he definitely looks like he's been getting around too much in the Guardians of the Galaxy at Epcot ride film, where it looks like he's just come off a bender.
I heard someone describe it like when he goes through and he's like, oh yeah, they have that Veggie Tales over at the Wonders of Life pavilion is kind of a thing. Where it's like, yes, they have Veggie Tales over at Wonders of Life at Epcot. So as guests entered, they were quickly informed via in-queue announcements of details surrounding the fictional Met company. Now, this is where they start to just...
Met. Where have I heard that before? Yeah.
The fictional Met company, the Miniaturized Exploration Technologies Company, as they like to be called, which was very on the nose for MetLife. Guests were then referred to as Met Observation Team members and would be informed via a pre-show shown within the queue of the mission they would be going on. Now, until 1993, signage would actually be hung up stating that the company was founded in 2063, and this was removed, and no one's really sure why, but it did raise that question, and a lot of attractions have this, where it's like, is this set in an alternate universe where that technology just exists, and we just have to deal with it, or is it set in the future? It makes sense, because it is future world.
Yeah, I was going to say, it's not as if, we have the Tomorrowland issue where tomorrow becomes the present, but I can't, off the top of my head, remember this becoming the present, so they're needing to remove that sign. Like, 1993, we can all now go into people's blood cells, so we need to remove this unrealistic 70 years in the future plaque. But yeah, so you're going through the queue, which can only be described as plain white corridors with a few screens.
It was incredibly sterile.
Yeah, it looks eerily similar to Star Tours as well. Like, you can tell they just took the bones from that, painted it a few different colors, and played some different videos. And those videos would introduce you to the ideas. So the first one would break down how the miniaturization process will work, what happens, how they kind of show you a guy. It happens to him. There's some, cool effects where they're like...
A guy?
The guy. He's the guy.
The guy?
And then the second one, which works in the same way Star Tours, once you got put into your rows, the little screen above you would come on. And that would explain, essentially, how to sit down, how to put on a seatbelt, all the really exciting stuff you go to a theme park for.
So essentially, the first one was just a big old lore dump. And then the other one was... This is what you do to stay safe on this attraction that is about to throw you around and hurl you like a little tiny person in a big glass jar.
Yeah, and it's interesting. The first one was kind of that thing where it's just shown on screens throughout the queue. Did you ever have that thing where you're trying to enjoy a pre-show video that's just built into the queue? There's still a lot of queue in front of you, but you stop for a second to watch it, and the people behind you will be like, move up, move up, move up, move up.
I just want to watch the video.
I just want to see the pre-show.
One of the things about these pre-show videos as well, and in glorious 1980s fashion, it was a lot of practical effects. And these actually look really cool when they go through and they explain the different functions, as well as one of the things that they seem to be really insecure about is anyone questioning this technology. I guess because it is presented in future world, they essentially go through and explain that you're going to be miniaturized, going to the guy, and they go into details about how that works. It's like, here's the technology that does that, and you're going to have lowered mass, so your weight will be lower. It's not the Ant-Man philosophy where, in fairness, that's just all magic. Even though they try to justify it multiple times, it's like Ant-Man's still strong because he can punch someone because he's still got all the mass of a grown man. And then they just pick up a building at one point.
Yeah.
It doesn't really make any sense.
Have you seen on the cruise how he makes a reference to the whole thing where, I don't know if it's appropriate for YouTube, but it's literally in the Disney Cruise Line. He makes a reference to how people are like, he should have just crawled inside Thanos and then gone full big. They literally make a reference to that on the Marvel restaurant at sea.
Well, now I have to go on the Disney Wish.
That sold you on the Wish.
I'm booking now.
Yeah.
As you're going through these various pre-shows as well, you go through something which I don't know why. It's just like one of the big focuses of this queue. What's called the dermatopic purification stations. Now, what I discovered is that these are essentially dermatopic, being your skin, like dermatitis, dermatology, all of those things, and then purification.
Yeah.
They're just kind of cleaning your skin, which is very polite of them.
I wonder if it's one of those, like, this is a super safe lockdown laboratory. You know those ones where they have to wear the full, like, suits and the masks and everything because they're fully locked off to the outside world? I wonder if this is their in-universe way of saying that, essentially.
Yeah. No one has to be cleaned off because you go through that. Like, they did a really big job on ensuring that everyone was fully invested in this technology. It's like some dad standing back there, he's like, I don't know if we're actually going to shrink down. I don't think that's the case. I don't think they have the technology. And then the lore dump comes in. They're like, you know what? I'm pretty convinced. They
use big word, dermatopic purification. They wouldn't use that word if this wasn't real.
No, they don't use that over at Six Flags or Busch Gardens. So 100% this is real.
As we were saying, the second screen after this one is essentially just telling you what to do once the doors open, because this thing has a decent capacity. All these kind of Star Toursy rides do, and all of that capacity has to do with just how quickly they get the next group in after the other group passes, which I always do find kind of weird, where it's like, oh, there's just another group here in front of me. Kind of gets rid of it's all about me, it's my story, which you get similar to when you go on Rise of the Resistance and you get taken into the Starship Destroyer, and then the door opens and there's like other guests there, and you're like, oh, kind of ruined that whole reveal.
I think it works a little bit for these attractions though, because it's kind of simulating like, oh yeah, there are heaps of tours. Nothing goes wrong. It's just your journey where something goes wrong. So should we get into the attraction itself?
Yeah, let's jump on board.
So during this secondary pre-show where they go through all of the boarding and they explain like what happens, which in Star Tours they have lots of aliens. In this one they just have scientists and people in suits and a few tourists. So it's kind of similar. It's basically, look, this whole thing is Star Tours, but science. Basically MetLife Star Tours.
Science to it.
During this pre-show, you're introduced to our ride's main cast and mission. Our vehicle will be piloted by the Captain Braddock, who's very handsome, by the way. He's got that slick, like, 80s Top Gun style. Like, this guy's seen some stuff.
Yeah.
Like, he's not just a captain because he's piloting these ships. Like, they plucked him from the top echelon of the Air Force to go and pilot around those Met machines. Because at this time, they've solved war, Luke. MetLife now rules the planet.
Oh, I guess it is the 20-somethings, yeah. MetLife is kind of the by and large, I feel, of this universe. They've taken over everything.
There is no conflict because there is only one leader, and that is MetLife. So you're introduced to Captain Braddock, and what we're going to do is we're going to go investigate the splinter of a volunteer. Dr. Cynthia Lair is already at the site, miniaturized, conducting tests on the immune system response to that splinter. And our vehicle is heading to that site to pick up Dr. Lair and head home. So it's all a simple mission.
Is she a secret villain?
Dr. Lair?
Yeah.
No.
Why is her name Dr. Lair? It's like the most thinly veiled secret villain in the third act name I think I've ever heard of. Dr. Lair.
She just like pulls off her face and she's like, it is I, a virus. It's like, no.
That's pretty much what I was expecting.
No, she's all above board. She checks out. That's not spoilers.
Okay. Good.
She ends up being a part of the problem as to the thing going wrong. So we've gone through the queue where we've gotten prepared for our journey. Shall we sit down in our vehicle, buckle up, pull on that really gross yellow strap?
That's kind of got brown edges because so many people have pulled it over the years. Yes, please.
From Skin Juice. It's the Skin Juice.
Yum.
So the guest vehicle, also known as Bravo 229, is moved from the bay to the miniaturization room, where technicians focused a particle reducer on the ship. The ship and crewmates are then shrunk down and sent into the subject's body under his skin.
This is a film, right? This is a very famous film, I was going to say.
Wait, do you mean like an...
No, this exact plot.
I don't know. I think it's just Body Wars.
I'm pretty sure there's like no, I think it's a film called like The Journey or something, The Marvelous Journey. It sounds like the more I hear, Body Wars kind of is like, nah, The Marvelous what? This is our own story. Definitely. Because it always happens in like, there'd be an episode of The Simpsons maybe where there's a reference to it. And Body Wars seems too niche for it to be as big of a reference that it is.
Body Wars. The Marvelous Journey?
We can cut this out to make us look really smart.
Fantastic Voyage.
Yeah, Fantastic Voyage.
Which came out in 1966. Okay, so the tagline for Fantastic Voyage: 4 men and 1 woman on the most fantastic, spectacular, and terrifying journey of their lives.
It might be the most 1960s tagline I've ever heard. 4 men and 1 woman.
It also seems to have that classic thing, looking at all of the pictures, where it's like, they'll get bumped, and then the woman gets like pushed into the guy. He's like, "I'll save you with my manly man arms."
Which is, that is the one where it's like, so many references over the years have been emulating that, essentially.
Pretty much. So Body Wars is a thinly veiled ripoff of Fantastic Voyage, the 1966 film. And you know what? If you even think about copying anything of Disney's, the SWAT will slam through your window and proceed to beat you up.
They can do it. They've got more money than you.
As we're going on our fantastic voyage through...
No, don't call it. They can't call it that. It's a war of the body, apparently.
After going through our body war to get through to the Splinter, we come across some white blood cells. Maybe we're introduced to the villain. I don't know. There's no villain here, but they could be.
Dr. Secret Base?
Yeah.
Is that the villain?
Guests arrive at the Splinter, meeting Dr. Cynthia Lair. As she takes a cell count, something goes wrong.
In my theme park ride? No. I don't believe it.
What is it? There's 2 plots in a theme park ride. There's something goes wrong, and then Fantastic Journey.
Yeah, and then there's sometimes like the crossover. There's a subplot of like a rich billionaire taking you on a fantastic journey that sometimes goes wrong. But pretty much that's it. I guess it's like most stories, you got to follow that arc. You got to have some form of tension building. So it makes sense for a 5-minute attraction to only have a few ways that it can go.
At this time, we're introduced to some white blood cells, which are seen on their way going to destroy the Splinter. Guests arrive at the Splinter, meeting Dr. Cynthia Lair. As she takes a cell count, something goes wrong, and she is accidentally pulled into a nearby capillary. Captain Braddock follows Dr. Lair into the vein, entering an unauthorized area, which is where our attraction begins. Our journey is no longer just boring. It is now a fantastic voyage.
How does your body have authorized and unauthorized areas? At what point do you go inside someone's body and then be like, okay, we can go through the bloodstream, we can go, through the lungs, we can go to the heart, but you cannot go to the left pointer finger. That is an unauthorized zone.
No. I think it's all determined by MetLife.
Oh, of course. Our Lord and Savior and owner of the universe in this world.
Captain Braddock steers us past the heart and into the right ventricle. From here, we enter the lungs, where we see Dr. Lair being attacked by a white blood cell. Now, look, this Wonders of Life pavilion, it's all about introducing us to the glorious things of both the human body, of life, of things that protect us. White blood cells, they're pretty cool. Do you want to know what happens next?
I think I know where this is going, and my brain refuses to comprehend it. So please, finish where you're going.
Captain Braddock blows it up. He fires a laser which kills the white blood cell, which frees Dr. Cynthia.
No, the white blood cells aren't the villain, right?
Yes.
So Dr. Lair, the person with the most villainous name, isn't the villain, and the real villain is one of the most useful parts of the human body.
Yes. That's Wonders of Life.
Makes sense. No notes. No notes.
This laser firing causes the ship to go into a low power state, where Dr. Lair suggests to use the brain's energy to recharge the ship. Passing the heart's left atrium, the ship goes through the artery to get into the brain, which, again, no notes. No notes.
Those are good. It's like the hip bones connected to the brain. That famous song.
Well, I guess they're going through the bloodstream, so it's like everything kind of connects to the bloodstream. Makes it easy to get around. It was also these sections which weren't particularly well received by guests, which we'll get into a little bit later when we talk about reception. But once we get to the brain, a kindly neuron makes contact with the ship, allowing it to regain power and deminiaturize outside of the subject's body, which is great because I don't think they explain whether the ship will just expand when it runs out of power inside this person.
Yeah, true. Oh, it's the Ant-Man issue all over again.
I can just imagine the guys in there and they like walk up and they're like, hey, thank you for volunteering. They're like, there's been a slight problem and there is a chance that the ship could rapidly expand inside your body.
Were they just getting a splinter out?
Yeah.
Can you imagine going to the doctor because you've got a splinter in your finger and by the end of the day, you literally explode from the inside out?
Or just go in there and be like, hey, I got a splinter. Like, I've got this really small problem. And instead of him getting the tweezers and pulling it out, he ushers you into a room where inside there is a giant laser.
There's a ship with all these, like, guests wearing Mickey ears, eating churros, and waving at you.
They're like, hi! And you're like, what the hell's going on here? I just want to get my splinter out. Like, that's the public system for you. So eventually, after all of this, you exit outside where you deminiaturize outside of the body as the subject sits up, gives you a good old wave, and Mission Control congratulates Braddock, Lair, and the guests on pulling off the most spectacular mission.
We did it! This is a universal ending. We couldn't have done it without you. Great job.
Your bravery has saved the universe. Thank you. But yeah, we are thanked for the most spectacular mission in the history of Met.
Does the subject, he walks out, he thinks he feels perfectly fine, and as soon as he gets out of the lab, he gets every single disease known to mankind because he no longer has white blood cells to fight any of them.
We only destroyed one white blood cell, and I guess it's fine if it's disposable. You can do whatever you want. This was the 80s, Luke. We had plenty of resources available to us. What's one white blood cell?
Oh, it's a single blood cell, exactly.
So Body Wars was ultimately received with a mixed reception.
I can't imagine why from that storyline. It seems watertight.
Some praised the thrilling experience, which at the time Epcot desperately needed, whilst others complained of motion sickness and nausea caused by the attraction. Now, this was a very prominent issue. This wasn't something where it's like, every now and then you hear about one person who gets off a ride, like Star Tours, and goes, oh, I'm feeling a little bit sick.
But yeah, I sometimes I get off Star Tours and I'm like, I like that, but I couldn't do it back to back to back. I would feel quite sick.
No, we're talking like cosmic rewind levels of wooziness. Like they have people there.
They have to bring the bin out right at the exit.
With bottled water and, just having preparations made to ensure that people aren't just throwing up left, right, and center. And this could be attributed to a couple of elements throughout the motion attraction. Now, the first is that the attraction thrashed you around a whole lot more than Star Tours. And thrashed is probably the right way. Because, Star Tours, you're in space.
Yeah.
You're in a three-dimensional environment.
You're kind of just floating around for a lot of it. At points, you're getting, story told to you as you kind of just softly float around. And then you'll go left and right and stuff like that. But it's just...
You just, chill out a little bit. And it's fine. Every now and then you get shot and you're like, ooh. And then, you'll get shot from the other side. And, ooh. No, this was like if they just picked you up and shook you around. That's all they did. They just real angry.
Just a really buff man underneath the ride vehicle, just shaking it around.
Ha-ha! So that was one problem. The next was that being inside the body, there were many moments where it felt like you were floating in liquid, almost as if you were on a boat at sea. To match the human bloodstream, the ride vehicle was made to rhythmically buck in time with a heartbeat, lead into a constant movement. And you can imagine, like, this is a simulator ride. If you're just being, like, cradled, swishing around back and
It's making me
forth.
feel sick thinking about it, let alone riding it.
And then on top of all of that, there was also the element of the fact that you were inside the human body, which is all like gooey and gross, like shiny.
I've seen the promotional footage for this ride, which literally looks like gross red goo. And that's the official picture. It's like red on the screen, red in the ride vehicle, like blood on the screen, essentially.
Star Tours had a lot of practical effects used within it because it kind of had to be. You need to build that universe.
Yeah, the models and the matte paintings and all those sort of things.
This had the hubris of the 1980s where they're like, we have computer-generated imagery now. We can make anything, anywhere, anytime. So let's simulate the inside of the human body and make it look like early 2000s screensavers.
We know a lot of people got sick was that one person's job was literally to hover over the e-stop button and watch to see if anyone looked too queasy. I was a cast member. I know there was some roles working at Disney where it's like, yes, I got this role. It's going to be a good shift. And then there's another role where you're like, yeah, it might be a tough one. To be on Chunder watch for your entire shift has to be one of the worst roles at Disney.
So soon after opening, Disney decided to make some moves. Outside of Chunder Watch, they also quickly cut out certain chunks of the film to help battle some of the motion sickness problems. And they did it fairly ungracefully. They used jarring fade cuts to edit out 20 sections.
Love me a cross dissolve.
This was like 20-second chunks of the attraction. So just every now and then, the ride would be going where it would just fade into a new scene and you would move on. Mostly this was done in the lung sequence where you were just kind of jostling around in this gross, swooshy environment. As Luke continues to express, it wasn't the most...
I'm not even on the ride. I'm just hearing about it and it's grossing me out.
What, you don't want swooshiness? When you sit down with the Imagineers and you go, what do we want in an attraction? We want swooshiness. I love swooshiness.
Did Imagineering go to MetLife or did MetLife go to Imagineering for this? I need to know.
I reckon God brought them both together.
The idea just floated down from the heavens and landed on the desk in front of the two parties.
I don't think I mentioned as well, but I think the Star Tours-like vehicle in this attraction is also called Met. So the Met company has the Met.
Met owned by Met, aboard the Met. You actually had to legally change your name to Met to go on board as well.
Now, you might be wondering, so we've gone Star Tours, then we've got Body Wars. And you're probably wondering, we've mentioned a couple of times that there was a problem that happened with this attraction a couple months down the line after it had opened. And, you know, you might think maybe it was famine. Maybe it was war. Maybe it was the oil embargoes of 1989 or whichever one it was.
Is this the Four Horsemen of theme park attractions?
No, the fourth horseman was actually the fact that Disney decided to open up another Star Tours at Disney's MGM Studios just 3 months later.
So they built the fake Star Tours, which made people sick, and then built the real Star Tours, which didn't make people sick in a different park. And I'm sure Met was very pleased about this behind the scenes.
I legitimately think this is one of the first times we've seen in a Disney park, or really any resort in the world, where they've gotten the exact same ride technology and put them within the same resort. Like, we see similar things with, you know, you have Dinosaur at Walt Disney World, and then you have Indiana Jones at Disneyland, but they're not the same resort. They're the same country, but they're different flavors.
Or it's such a different usage of the ride system. You know, like the trackless ride system in Aquatopia and Pooh's Honey Hunt is similar, but they're so differently used you wouldn't notice it. These are the same ride almost, just with a different film playing. Even the pre-show and the queue look almost identical to the Star Wars versions.
So this faced a problem where legitimately straight after Star Tours opened, because it already had that historical appeal of being opened at Disneyland, people came over to Walt Disney World, they did Star Tours, and then they saw Body Wars, and they were like, ew, it's the gross Star Tours. It immediately, despite it opening first, became the secondary option to an attraction which opened up after it. And it's pretty hard to compete with Star Wars, I'm going to say. Like a generic attraction versus Star Wars, you're going to have a problem there.
It'd be like if Epcot nowadays opened an attraction where you just got to drive a spaceship around, and then they opened Smuggler's Run like 2 months later. Of course the second one's going to be more popular.
After MetLife's sponsorship expired in June of 2001, Epcot would continue to operate the Wonders of Life Pavilion. The popularity of Body Wars began to decline over the years, fairly rapidly after the attraction opened. In 2004, the park announced that the attraction would begin seasonal operation. The entire pavilion would officially close on January 1st, 2007. Happy New Year, Wonders of Life!
The death knell, the iconic death knell seasonal attraction. They don't do it anymore, but it used to be the sign of, yeah, this thing ain't gonna last long. Except during 2008, where a lot of stuff did go seasonal and actually did reopen. Stuff like Carousel of Progress, I believe. But back in like 07, 04 era, that was it. You knew it was the beginning of the end.
Yeah, it was going. You're not coming away from seasonal operation. Like, people don't run up to an attraction and go, oh my gosh, it's seasonal now. I love it more. So what is the legacy of Body Wars? What happened to it after it decided to close in 2007?
I think if we're talking about legacy, the easiest place to look is still over that side of Epcot. Because when this opened, this was the one and only thrill attraction at Epcot, where now that entire side of Epcot is thrill rides. We have Guardians, Mission Space, and Test Track all in a row. So it kind of was the beginning of what guests were actually looking for from Epcot, much to our disappointment. But the fact that these are the things that survived means it all.
I want more edutainment.
Yeah, bring it back.
Give me more. After the ride closed in 2007, it was actually interesting because Star Tours continued on and still continues on to this day. So what they would do is frequently use the Body Wars installation to test additions to Star Tours.
Oh, so like new adventures continue.
Yeah. So new vehicles, like
Interesting.
they could test it out without bringing Star Tours down, and they could go in there, test out the new footage, try the different feelings of it. Motion would be the right word to use there.
Yeah.
Which was really beneficial as well. Now they had a plethora of spare parts that they could use to keep Star Tours operational for as long as possible. I'm just going to quickly let Norman out.
On September 11, 2012, Walt Disney Imagineering would file a notice of commencement with Orange County indicating that they intended to selectively demolish parts of the pavilion and then didn't. And then, they started taking out parts of the Body Wars ride system, but didn't actually demolish anything, even though they asked for it. And then, 5 years after that, they were like, guess what? We're finally doing something with it. The Play Pavilion, which will open in 2021, and people have been enjoying for the last 3 years. Yeah, that didn't happen.
Because the Play Pavilion in itself was advertised as a high-touch experience of interactive elements that you could enjoy for all the world to touch. And no one wanted that after COVID-19.
So it's just sitting there quietly. As we were saying earlier in the episode, it did become a hotbed for urban exploration. There's plenty of videos out there of people being like, oh, here is Body Wars, except they're using the queue as storage for stalls, like ice cream carts, essentially.
Body Wars kind of exists now after everything, after the Play Pavilion, after all of the changes to Wonders of Life and the full dismantling of the attraction. it's now fallen into a legacy position of embodying what was originally known as Epcot, because there's this discussion that happens time and time again about like, what is Epcot? What does it mean? And we've even done a video on this before, trying to define what Epcot actually is. And it was that mix of edutainment that kind of took itself a little bit too seriously at times, but it made it really stand out amongst the plethora of theme parks we have now.
Made it different. It is just Magic Kingdom with World Showcase nowadays.
So I'm Dom.
I'm Luke.
And that was our journey to discuss and document Body Wars. This is a new thing that we're trying out. It's a little bit different to the stuff that we've done before, but if you enjoy it, if there's a certain attraction that you want us to discuss and document a little bit earlier than some of them, because I think there are millions that we're going to have to get through, and this is going to be a very long journey, let us know.